Welcome in, Outkick the Show. I am your fearless leader, Clay Travis. I hope all of you are having fantastic Tuesdays wherever across this great country you may find yourself, or indeed wherever in the world. I'm going to be honest with you. I've had to break out the rare double nap today. 2 different 30-minute naps today to make up for the fact that last night's NCAA title game did not start until 9:20 p.m. Eastern. SBAP is my rule of life in conjunction with DBAP. I had to break out the double naps. There's no way to defend a 9:20 Eastern start. I don't know about you guys too, but when I stay up and watch a tight game and it goes into overtime and things like that, it's not like I immediately fall asleep right after the game either. I'm all worked up for the entire process of the game. And it takes me a long time to dial it back down. And some of you out there are like, well, it's always at 9:20. Doesn't make it a good decision. Doesn't make it a good decision. It's insanely stupid, in my opinion, to start a game at 9:20 Eastern when nearly half the American public lives in the Eastern time zone. Here's the rough breakdown of where people live. About 47%-ish live on the East Coast. Around 27% or so live in the Central time zone. So you're talking, live math with me is always a difficulty, but a huge majority of the country is there. Only about 25% of people live in the Mountain time zone or the Pacific time zone. So you're talking about adjusting the time for around 15% of the overall population that happens to live in California, Washington, or Oregon. No other sport, not baseball, not basketball, the NBA, not pro football, not college football starts games this late. I think it is an absolutely stupid decision to start this game at 9:20 at night. So I'm sitting around all day, hanging out, hoping that it's finally going to be time for the game to start. And when it finally does start, I think, man, I'm in a roll here. I had the under. First 5 minutes, there were hardly any points scored. I think 5 total. And look, hold on, pause for a second. People say, well, Sunday night football and Monday night football, whatever. But they start earlier, all right? My point is not when the games end. I hate stupid people who aren't intelligent enough to understand basic points. My argument is that 9:20 Eastern is too late to start a game, all right? Period. It shouldn't happen. If it does happen, it's okay if it happens, and it's a Western Conference playoff series, right? I'm okay with that when it's a series geared towards the western part of the country. That is all that matters. The NBA Finals start at 8 o'clock Eastern. Monday Night Football starts at 8 o'clock Eastern. The NHL playoffs start at 8 o'clock Eastern. Thursday Night Football starts around 8 o'clock Eastern. This is not complicated. This is not difficult to understand. It is insanely stupid to play the game on Monday, in my opinion, and tip it off at 9:20 Eastern. The vast majority of the American public agrees with me. CBS, Turner, TBS, bad decisions here when they make the decision about what time to play it. All right? That is my first thought on the NCAA tournament. My second thought, I want to congratulate UVA. UVA played a fantastic final game. They were insanely fortunate in getting to the championship game, and I'm going to get to this in a second, in their final 3 games. But I love the storyline of UVA going from being the first team to decisively have the worst loss in NCAA history, a 1 seed losing to a 16, Maryland, Baltimore County beating them last year. I just want you to think about how easy it would have been in that scenario for UVA to curl up in the fetal position and allow this to hang over their head for years into the future. Instead, I think Tony Bennett deserves a lot of credit. I think Kyle Guy, I think DeAndre Hunter, I think that Ty Jerome, who are the three leaders of the University of Virginia's team, deserve insane amounts of credit for what they were able to do in virtually the same 12 months. They went from 12 months and 2 weeks, the worst losers in the history of the NCAA tournament, to winning this thing overall. This is absolutely phenomenal when you really break it down. What was able to be accomplished by UVA is a testament to how sports constantly offers the opportunity for redemption. And if you remember in this bracket, they were down 14 to Gardner-Webb. They were down 6 at the half. They could have very easily lost along the way. I applaud the redemptive spirit of the Virginia Cavaliers and fighting their way to the championship. Now, here is a stat that will blow your mind, I think, and demonstrate how difficult it is to win a championship and how much luck is involved. Virginia trailed in the Elite Eight, the Final Four, and the national championship games against Purdue, against Auburn, and against Texas Tech, with fewer than 15 seconds left in regulation in all 3 of those games, and won all 3 of those games. I want you to think about how crazy that is for a minute. They were down with 15 seconds or less remaining to Purdue, to Auburn, and to Texas Tech, and they won all 3 of those games down the stretch. Now, partly that's about having a veteran backcourt, not panicking. But that is a remarkable accomplishment. When you are losing 3 games, 15 seconds to play, they were down 4 to Auburn. They were down 3 to Purdue, with Purdue having a free throw to make it a 4-point game. And they were down 3 to Auburn. To Texas Tech. So it's not like they were just down 1 point and could score 1 basket. They managed to come back in all 3 of those games. That was an incredible comeback, incredible accomplishment. Hats off to Virginia. Having said that, I got one additional thought other than the late tip on that break. It's important to be good. It's also important to be lucky. Virginia was both in this championship run. All right. Here is my thought in general on the game. The one thing I would change, I think we got to be careful with using instant replay to micromanage the game. I thought that the right call was made with 1 minute left on the out-of-bounds call from a clear, zoomed-in perspective. I thought the wrong functional call was made. And let me explain. When you are coming down the court and somebody knocks the ball away from you, the physics of your pinky finger being the last to touch the ball might well be correct, but the way that that play has been called for years is the guy who knocks it out of bounds, and in that case it would have been DeAndre Hunter. The ball is out on them, right? So I think we got to be careful when we go into all these high-tech instant replay reviews that we're not fouling up the spirit of basketball. I don't know how much we gain from replay in many different scenarios in basketball. To me, replay should exist to right egregious wrongs, not to infallibly analyze every single frame of a shot. And I think we're moving towards analyzing every single frame of a shot as opposed to telling an official, hey, you got 10 seconds to watch it. Watch it for 10 seconds. If you can't tell what happened, then the call on the court stands. I think the ball should have been out on UVA there, especially when you consider that Kyle Guy committed a foul earlier in that play. So I think you give 10 seconds to review it, and then you move on. But UVA's the champions. That's the only thing that makes me a little bit nervous about instant replay and the way we analyze it frame by frame at this point in time, right? All right. A couple of thoughts. Somebody says, who decides what's egregious? You get 10 seconds to review it. There's no way they could have reviewed that for 10 seconds and made a determination about whether the ball went out of bounds off of UVA or off of Virginia. Therefore, the Virginia player who clearly knocked it out of bounds, that would be the call that stands. Rick Barnes turns down UCLA and makes the decision to stick with Tennessee. This was, I thought, a really big statement for Tennessee, not necessarily because I think Rick Barnes is the greatest basketball coach in America. I clearly don't. I think he's a Sweet 16 coach at a Sweet 16 program. I think he's going to have to get lucky to get beyond the Sweet 16, and I'm not sure if it's going to be able to ever happen, okay? So I think the question that is out there now is we got to stop evaluating programs and start recognizing that coaches matter way more than programs. To wit, a lot of people say, well, UCLA is a historic top 5 program in basketball. So if UCLA makes a bad hire, they're not going to be good. We'll see whether or not Mick Cronin is a good or bad hire. I never think it's a good sign when you hire a guy who's been a coach for a long time, and Cincinnati Bearcat fans are rejoicing. I believe in 12 straight years, Mick Cronin has never been able to advance beyond the first weekend of the NCAA tournament. So when everybody celebrates when the coach is hired, that ain't a good sign. I can't think of very often where a coach is hired away by a program and everybody cheers at that program who knows him well, and then he ends up being able to be really, really successful. So UCLA is historically a really good program. But a historically really good program without a great coach doesn't matter. Kentucky basketball is historically a great program. When they had a crappy coach in Billy Clyde Gillespie, they pretty much stunk. When Alabama had like 15 years of stinking, it was because they didn't have Nick Saban and they didn't have a good coach. What matters in college athletics more so than it ever has before is whether you have a really good coach or not. Programs matter less than coaches. And I think this is an interesting corollary in society in general. The rise of individual power has accompanied a decline in collective power of institutions. Whether it's Donald Trump disrupting the presidency or the overall cable cord exploding, whether it's a decline in overall large governmental institutions worldwide, what has happened is a person rises to power or rises to prominence and allows that prominence to attach to everything else around them, as opposed to an institution or program making a coach, right? Think about that for a minute and think about how well you can draw those lines across many different disciplines right now. We are in an age when the power of the individual is ascendant and the power of the program declines. Mark Few is the most successful coach right now on the West Coast because he happens to be right now at Gonzaga. The Zags are good. If Mark Few was at UCLA, UCLA would be as good as Gonzaga is. It's because of where Mark Few is, not because of the program. And I think that's why we've seen coaching salaries skyrocket to such an extent, because so many people out there have started to recognize, wait a minute, a program paired with a great coach can lead to tremendous success. But if you had to choose between a historically powerful program or a prominent coach right now, I think there's zero doubt that you would pick the coach over the program. Talent follows coaching, not programs. So I think this is a big win for Tennessee because I think Rick Barnes is a top 15 to 20-ish coach in college basketball. He is set up to make a real run in the 2020 recruiting class. If he had left, there'd be probably a really low chance of Grant Williams coming back, of Jordan Bone coming back. If both of those guys come back, then Tennessee will be a top 5 team next year. Rick Barnes staying gives them a high ceiling and limits how far the floor falling can be. Having said that, the SEC coaching is on an absolute tear right now. Think about what the SEC added in coaching. Buzz Williams. They added Nate Oates. And they added Eric Musselman. And those are the 3 main additions. And then Vanderbilt took a risk and they went and hired Jerry Stackhouse. The Pac-12 is an awful conference right now. Listen to their coaching hires. Kyle Smith, Mark Fox, Mick Cronin. That is a big difference. It's why I would argue there is a strong case that 1 to 14, there is a strong case that the best coaches in college basketball now dwell in the SEC because the money being rolled off by the SEC networks are becoming more and more substantial. And as a result, they can't spend all their money on football coaching. They are going out and hiring better 1 to 14 coaches than anybody else in the world of college basketball, in my opinion. All right, Kyle Korver. Did you guys see this story? I read it, and it's just further evidence of what a systemic bias exists in the way sports media covers stories. Kyle Korver's been in the NBA a long time. I've never heard his opinion ever referenced on any issue in a substantial way in the entirety of his career. Kyle Korver has been in the NBA for 20 years, or whatever the heck it is, 18 years. I have never seen him say anything that has ever been a headline in my life. Then he decides to have some other person ghostwrite an article for him at the Players Tribune talking about white privilege and how much white privilege he has and how racist society is and all these other things. And I'll be damned if it isn't a lead story at ESPN, if it isn't a lead story everywhere. I haven't watched television today, but I'm sure ESPN's been talking about white privilege all day. This is an example that I wrote about in my book. I was checking to see if I had a copy of my book nearby, Republicans Buy Sneakers Too, of how stories such as these are treated as legitimate news stories when it's just one dude's opinion, but the majority of the sports media agree with him. Kyle Korver has never been a story on any opinion in his basketball career. He goes out and says, white privilege is a thing, white privilege is awful, and he trends nationwide, #1 story everywhere, only because of his opinion. If he had said, white privilege, I don't believe in it, nobody would have covered it. It wouldn't have gone anywhere. He also wouldn't write that piece because he would know that he would get no attention and it would probably hurt him in the liberal sports media community. This is one of the most ridiculous things that I see happen all the time, over and over and over and over again. Look, Kyle Korver is entitled to his political opinions like anybody else. But when you pay a dude or a girl, who knows who wrote it, to write a piece for you on the Players Tribune designed to get political attention that you know will be favorable, and then ESPN treats it as one of the 3 or 4 biggest stories in the world of sports. This is an example of systemic bias that exists in the way that media covers stories in sports. Kyle Korver didn't say anything about the world of sports. He didn't say anything interesting. He didn't say anything unique. He said something that sports writers, by and large, agree with. And so they praised him and they promoted him. And it happened everywhere, all over the social media arena. I happen to think that white privilege is totally made up. I happen to think that systemic bias is totally made up. I believe that what has happened is, in the wake of the civil rights movement, which is a quintessentially American movement, designed on American goals, which typically are to be better. If you go read about the civil rights movement and you study history, civil rights protesters wanted to be better than the racists who were opposing their basic human rights and their basic rights of American society. They wanted to be better. Since the civil rights movement, white liberals, by and large, and I think this is true, white liberals, by and large, have taken away the power of black activism and turned black people, by and large, into perpetual victims. White liberals have created a cottage industry of racial aggrievement whereby black people only have political power when they claim to be powerless. In other words, if you speak up and try to take ownership from an individual perspective of your own life and go with the up by the bootstraps way of thinking, you are blaming people who are not successful and you are ridiculed for having that opinion. And I don't know what it is. I think it's because white liberals, in order to maintain political power, need black voters to all vote for the Democratic Party. And the way that they sell them on voting for the Democratic Party is by making them all victims. And I think Kyle Korver is likely well-intentioned, but what he is doing is furthering the pyramid of victimization that is predicated on identity politics in our culture today. I don't believe in telling anyone that they are a victim. When I was a kid and I was born and raised, the idea of being a victim was something that you fought against. The idea that somebody would say something with words that would hurt your feelings and somehow render you unable to take control of your own agency was the exact opposite of everything that I was taught. We have created a cottage industry of perpetual victimization, which takes away the agency of the victim and renders them perpetually unable to overcome something that they can't see. We have moved from actual bias to systemic bias, which doesn't even exist in my opinion, to cultural appropriation, which is literally the entire basis of human society. We take from every society things that work and spread them around the globe and around all cultures of all races, ethnicities, religions, and everyone else. And we have created a grievance politics, a pyramid of victimization predicated on what your identity is and how much of a victim you can be. If you are gay and you are a minority and you are transgender, you are at the peak of victimization, which is why people in that particular persuasion begin all of their opinions by saying, as a gay, transvestite, Latino, black woman, right? That's why they start that way. It is our modern day signifier. Like back in the day, people used to use their title. I'm the Baron von Clausewitz of the Third Order Regimental Guard, and I believe. My argument is really simple. Why should your physical appearance impact whether or not I believe your opinion? Look and count how often people predicate now in modern American society their opinions by describing things that they can't control. As a white man, I don't believe anything as a white man. As Clay Travis, a person who lives in Nashville, Tennessee right now, I have lots of opinions. You can agree or disagree with them, but me being a white guy shouldn't impact whether or not you agree with my opinion, just like you being a black guy or a black woman or an Asian man or an Asian woman or Hispanic or anything else. Your arguments need to stand for themselves regardless of what your identity is. And Kyle Korver is just further leading us into the identity universe. I think what is going on here. I think he's well-intentioned, but I think he's creating another example of the pyramid of victimization. All right, a couple of other things. Chris Davis. As I go do television right now, Chris Davis of the Orioles. If you are right now playing Major League Baseball and you had 49 at-bats, you could not have done worse than Chris Davis of the Baltimore Orioles. He has gone 0 for 49 in his last 49 at-bats, which is the worst 49-game hitting streak performance in the history of sports. No one in Major League Baseball history has ever gone 0 for 49. Never has happened, never will happen, maybe ever again. Maybe Chris Davis will go 0 for 50, 0 for 51, 0 for 52. I don't know. But for everybody out there who thinks, man, it's been a rough week. For everybody out there who thinks, man, I wasn't very good at my job today. You are probably better at your job right now than Chris Davis is at his. He might have set a record that will never be broken. It's hard to go 0 for 49. He's making a $100 million contract to play baseball, and he has the exact same batting average as you or I would be if we got to bat in his place the last 49 times. All right, I love all of you. My name is Clay Travis. This is Outkick the Show. I'm going to be live in 25 minutes. He is the Cal Ripken of sucking. He's the Joe DiMaggio of hitless baseball. He is doing something that no one else has ever done before. Move over Joe DiMaggio's 56-game hitting streak. It might be just as impressive to go 0 for 49. All right, television on FS1 now. Lock it in. Made you a lot of gambling money. If you follow the picks, I told you to take Kyle Guy yesterday, plus 450. I told you to take overtime, nearly 10-1. 2 big wins. I love all of you. Kisses. My name is Clay Travis. This has been Outkick the Show. DBAP, unless you need to SBAP. I'll see you guys on television on FS1 and then tomorrow on radio. See y'all. Thank you. Love you. See y'all.